Hey, I'm Eshghi, and this is Metal Mastermind. So I think when you're inexperienced, it's really easy to become enamored by a certain microphone or a certain processor. But I think it makes sense to kind of pay attention to context, right? Like, I could get a $10,000 microphone, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if I have a $200 audio interface with stock preamps and stuff like that, right? It makes more sense for me to maybe upgrade my audio interface and maybe get a reasonably priced microphone when I upgrade, and upgrade my speakers and kind of like sort of do it in a way that makes sense, right? So I think it really depends, but I will say that one of the most important things in your studio, in fact maybe the most important thing, is that you can literally hear what's going on in your listening position. And if you can't hear what's going on in your listening position accurately, that would be the first thing that I would sort of attack. And a lot of people say, you know what? I live in an apartment in New York City. I can't treat my room. There's only one place I can put my speakers. And I get that. A lot of this is ergonomic. But if you haven't figured this out, basically there's any different place you put your speakers in your room, it's going to sound different. And how far apart you put your speakers in your room, it's going to sound different. And there's ways to go about placing your speakers. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that what you have, you probably haven't gotten the most out of already. And you don't need to spend a ton of money to get the most out of what you have. What you need is knowledge. There's a great book called Mixing with Your Mind, which I love. And it shows you how to set up your speakers in a very, it's somewhat scientific, but it's also very practical for anybody to do. It involves finding the place where low end works the best in your room, and then finding the best distance from your speakers based on the firmness of the stereo image of how close and how far apart it is. So upgrading is a weird thing, because I've definitely spent a lot of money on gear that I thought was going to help me a lot. And it was cool to learn the gear, but then I realized, like, oh, my problems are actually somewhere else. But I'm not saying never upgrade. I'm saying do so in a way that makes sense for you, both financially and for what you need. I found that a lot of people who have a pile of mics and a pile of plugins didn't know how to use each tool very well before they moved on to just getting a whole lot of other stuff. And the worst thing is just being, basically lost. You open your plugin menu, you don't know where you're at, I know some mixers who use 5 plugins and they know them really, really well, and I'd rather you be in that position than just have all this stuff that you don't know how to use. So it depends on who you are and what you're trying to do. But I'd say, number one, your priority should be, can I hear what's going on in my listening position? And a lot of ways that you could tell is, does stuff sound different when you leave your room? Do your mixes translate? Now, when it comes to strictly like, what should I get for an upgrade? Your speakers should be the best speakers that you can afford, that are appropriate for your space, that have the most robust low-end frequency response possible. Again, that is appropriate for the room, because it depends on the size of your room. And it's probably in your best interest to treat the first reflections, right, with absorption. And it's not difficult to build absorption panels. If you know someone handy, offer them some studio time, and maybe a carpenter can build you some absorption panels. You don't necessarily have to buy the expensive ones from online. You just need fabric and insulation and a wood frame if you want to get fancy, and you've got great absorption. You can use a bookshelf for diffusion. There's a lot of different things you can do. But yeah, I really think treating your space, getting the best possible speakers that you can afford, making sure that you're getting the most out of your listening position by also making it ergonomic for yourself, a good chair, a good desk. These are the things that people overlook. If you're going to be sitting somewhere for 10 hours, I know it's not as fun as buying a compressor, but this chair is expensive, but we can sit in it for 12 hours and work and You know, even though I have back problems, I like sitting in this chair for that long. So that's a really, really important thing. If you are in a situation where you can't treat your room, SonarWorks is incredible. Even if you treat your room, SonarWorks is a very, very good resource. It helps you correct the anomalies in your listening position so that your mixes will translate better when you leave your room, which is really what we're all looking for as mixers. Anybody who's ever mixed something, thought it was great, and then went to their car and was disappointed, they know that feeling. So that's what I'll say. I'll say you want to be able to hear properly, 100%. And the way to do that is to get your room in shape and to get your speakers, you know, in the right place, and, you know, use some room correction software if you can. I think a lot of upgrades that are things like, I'm going to get this outboard compressor to cut vocals. It can be really cool, but like, what good is it if you can't hear what's going on in your speakers? You can't even really fully accurately tell what this expensive piece of equipment is doing. And you probably have plugins that do something similar. So that's my thoughts on upgrading. I think a lot of people upgrade unnecessarily or in the wrong way. I mean, I love gear. Let's be honest. Like, I mean, you know, all this stuff, like, you know, do I need all of it? Like, I don't need all of it. Do I use it and enjoy it? I do. But, you know, if I had just enough pre's in here to record drums and, you know, these speakers and a couple of, you know, an EQ and a compressor plug-in, I would be perfectly happy doing the work that I do. Honestly, that is what we did today. We didn't use, when I record, you know, I'm trying to just get a clean capture, especially with drums, you know, and distorted guitars. Like, I don't really need to use a compressor on that. I don't, you know, and, you know, you have tons of compressors and EQs. So I don't mind giving you the flexibility of, you know, being able to crank those by giving you a clean signal. Yeah, please don't take anything I've said as, you know, don't go out and get this thing you want, because I've bought a lot of gear that I love, you know, but I've also, especially when I was less experienced, bought a lot of equipment that I thought was gonna make my recording sound professional, but really I just needed to work on my ears more than anything else, and my, you know, my listening position. Just a really quick story. Like, I used to have all this outboard gear that I owned, and like, you know, this is I have stuff at studios that I work at, but like, you know, I used to have like distressors and 1176s and Neve 1272 preamps, and I loved all that gear. It was part of a studio that I owned, and you know, when I decided when I started working at a much bigger studio, basically I sold most of it. And although, like, sometimes I go, oh man, I wish I still had that thing, like, I'm doing way better work now than I ever was then, and I own a lot less gear. And, you know, I'm not saying that, like, it's not good to have gear. I'm just saying that it's not the thing that puts you over the top. And I think even the guys with lots and lots of gear will say that. And sometimes it sounds like it's like they're putting you on, but they're not. Because the fact is, if they're sitting in a room with a ton of gear that they accumulated over 30 or 40 years, they also have accumulated the knowledge to know that, like, yes, I do this work with this gear, but like, this gear is not it. It's not, you know, it's a tool. And it's the person that's it. It's the ears and the experience and all that.